Hello, and thank you so much for joining me tonight. My name is Sasha Reed, and I hope that you are all really well. I have got some super exciting stuff to share with you tonight that I have been dying to share with you for absolutely ever. So CraftStash have a new co-brand that I am getting the chance to launch tonight. It is called CraftStash & Co. And what that means is it's CraftStash and other people. And I got asked if I would like to be one of those people, and I get to be first. So I'm well excited. This is my collection here. I'm going to share it with you tonight. I'm going to show you what it looks like, how it works, and then I'm going to give you 4 tutorials on what you can do with these products. And I thought what I would do is change it up a little bit and share with you some techniques that you may not think about using with these products. So firstly, that's me. There I am. So excited. So I got to design these products. I got to pick what I wanted. I got to help design this amazing paper pack and all these products. And I'm so excited. They all work beautifully well. They all go so nicely together. They're quite an awesome collection in terms of hitting lots of different seasons. Apart from Christmas, you can kind of use these for anything. Even, well, to be fair, even the star you could use for Christmas. So I have got 4 layering die sets. I have got, and I'll share these with you in more detail, but I've got the flower. I have got the butterfly, which is my favorite one, so there's probably the most samples of the butterfly. Got a star, and we've got a balloon. Then we have also got a stamp set. So I wanted a sentiment that would be the same sentiment, but just different fonts, different sizes, that kind of thing. I was really tired of needing happy birthday time and time again and having all these stamp sets that cut these beautiful sentiments, but I would end up with 10 different types of sentiments when I just wanted happy birthday. So we've got happy birthday and we've got thank you, which are very common ones. And we've also got some dies to match, so I'll share those with you in just a second. So I have got my paper pack. I'm going to share this one with you first. So we have got 6 designs and you get 4 of each. They are 190 GSM. They're a nice thickness. You can stamp on them, you can die cut them, you can use your whatever products you would normally use on cardstock on them. So we've got sort of this rainbow light one. This is the one that's kind of half dark, half light, and the blue. These are designed to be like a watercolor wash or a very watercolory background. This is my favorite one. It's probably been on almost all the cards. I love the fuchsia pink. So we've got that color there, that one, and this is the last one. But that is the paper pack. Loads of gorgeous, very neutral backgrounds that you can use on pretty much anything. So first up, I'm going to just quickly share with you these stamp and dies. So we've got 5 happy birthdays and 5 thank yous. And we've got the dies to cut them out. And you've got 2 different options. You can either cut out a normal banner style, or you can do the one with the tails on the edges. So you got 2 different styles. I've got them both shown here. I'll zoom in on that in just a second. So when you stamp them out, they all stamp in a little bundle. And then all you have to do is simply place the dies over top and run it through your die cutting machine to cut them all out. And again, you can choose whichever version you like. They both come with an outline die, so you can outline your sentiment, or you can just use it as a single one. If you would like to have more white space around your stamped image, then you could just cut it out individually with the slightly bigger version. So these back on to these very nicely. So as you can see here, we've got the die cut out version on both of them. You can interchange them. You can either have the little tails facing down or the tails facing up, whatever you prefer, whatever makes you happy. And again, they layer up beautifully with the background layers. So I apologize because it's my mistake that I glued white on white, so it's a bit difficult to see. But if I hold it up to the camera, you can see how well those stamps line up on top of the dies. And then you can see how beautifully they outline the initial dies as well. Now you'll get a chance to see these in action in just a minute, but I thought I would share with you my little sample boards of how they layer up together. Yours will come in some simple plastic packaging. Mine did as well, but I popped them into these little pocket envelopes that I just picked up, like 10 for £2 or something like that. You can get them in most shops. And they're just A5 wallets, and then I can keep all my die cuts, my spare ones in there. for future use. So you will get your dies in a normal cellophane bag, and then you can do what you like with them. So this is the star. This is what it looks like when you've layered it up in the yellow ombre effect. So you have your base, your second layer, third layer, and your fourth layer. The fourth layer is always the most detailed one. And the base layers, they do all come with a bit of embossing in them. So if you were to use an embossing mat on your die cutting machine, you will get the raised images. And you'll see what I mean when we do our projects towards the end of the video, because I do use the die as a stencil as well. So you've got your little ones here. They all come with a set of little ones. They're really, really super cute. Next we've got the balloons. They're also really fun. There's 5 dies again. So you've got the 4 layering dies, and then you've got your little ones, which come as one die. Sorry, I realized on the last one I didn't actually share with you what the dies kind of look like. They're quite, some of them are quite big. The flower and the balloon are quite long. So you get your 4 dies, and then you get your little ones. You get 3 bigger ones and 3 really small ones. They come in every single bundle. You get the same die as what the main image is. So if it's a flower, you'll get flowers. Star, you get stars, that kind of thing. And on a couple of the dies, you also get a little bit of embossing detail on the top of the die as well. So on the topmost layer, you will see there's some embossing there. So you can use them all individually, or you can use them together to layer up. They're really versatile dies. So here's that balloon die in action. We've got the full set here in the teals, and you can see the individual layers on the paper, and plus the little ones that you get in the set. And if I hold it up to the camera, you can kind of see that embossing detail I was talking about, where it kind of shines through the die and pops up. And this is without using the embossing shim in my die cutting machine. Then we have got the flower. Again, it's 5 dies like all the other ones. This one you get the base with the stem in it. So with that first base die, it makes it quite big, and it fits an A5 card quite nicely, a nice big card. So that's it all layered up. So there's your first layer, second layer, third and fourth, and then your little mini ones. Then last but not least is my favorite. It's the butterfly. I absolutely love this one. And this one looks like this. So your base die has got the antenna attached to it. It's also got the embossing detail, which is really difficult to pick up on camera. And then you've got layer 1, 2, and 3. And on the third layer, there is a little bit of embossing detail just in the wing onto there. And the top 3 layers have the see-through bit, so you can actually see the body and see the antenna poke out from underneath. And then you get your little baby ones as well. So that is all of the dies up close and personal, die cut out for you. So let's move on to our crafting portion. So I know I said I wasn't going to give you a demo on the very basic of how to put these dies together, but I thought actually I'll share my tip and trick on how I put layering dies together, just to make it easier and quicker, because I'm quite lazy and I like to be fast when I craft. So I've die cut out all my layers. I've got them in an ombre sort of color style. And I've got these sponges which I got from CraftStash. Now I reuse them, so I'm going to use it for glue, but I'm going to wash it immediately when I'm done. And as long as you wash it immediately, it won't wreck your sponge. So I've also got a piece of acetate. This is the media matte, I think a mixed media matte from CraftStash as well. And I'm just going to take the medium-sized sponge to use to apply my glue. Now any craft glue will work really well, and the reason I'm using the matte is to be able to apply the glue on but be able to wipe it off in between, so I'm not having to worry about needing multiple bits of paper or having my die cut stick to any paper. It pulls off of this acetate sheet really nicely. So I get my sponge a little bit inked up with glue, and then I would just dab it on. Now my paper in this instance is very, very thin, so it's slightly curling as I put it down. So I'm going to go ahead and wipe in between each one. I'm using a baby wipe to get the glue off so I don't wreck any cloths, and then I'm drying it with a reusable towel. So again, I just dab on that glue and then stick it right over top of it. It lines up beautifully, super easy to work with, and you just do your layers working whichever direction you like to work. I like to work from the bottom up because I've got the extra elements on the bottom die usually. So there's my layered die. Quick and easy way, just using a bit of glue. Takes about 1 minute to 2 minutes to do. So for the first technique we're going to do, we are going to use our dies to make stamps. So we're going to make our own backgrounds out of the die cuts and create them into stamps. For this, I like to use the most intricate layer. So I like to use the top layer of all the dies if I'm going to do a stamp. They've got most detail in them, the finer die cut bit, so you just get more of a definition in your image when you stamp with it. I'm using some fun foam. This is just the cheapest fun foam I could find, quite thin, and all I'm going to do is run it through my die cut machine. And what you want to make sure you do is run it once. Do not go back and forth, only go through once. If you go back and forth, it warps the foam and you get a really distorted image. If you go just once through, it will cut, I promise you, it'll cut perfectly clean and give you a beautiful image. So I cut them all out just so you could see, and also I didn't know what I was doing at that point, so I die cut each one. Removable adhesive is my best friend, and that's what I'm going to use to stick this down. If you've got fun foam that has got a sticky side, then you could just peel off the release sheet and stick it on. If you struggle to get any of that adhesive off your block, then you can go ahead and use some rubbing alcohol, isopropyl alcohol, or hand sanitizer, and you can easily get that sticky off. So today I'm working with an A5 card base, so an A4 sheet folded in half. And to give it a better effect, I'm actually going to cut a little base to go on top of my card panel that is just 1 centimeter on each side smaller. So I get out my paper trimmer and I just line it up to 1 centimeter and trim it, and then flip it and trim it at 1 centimeter, and then I don't have to use my brain and work out what 1 centimeter less is. I can just cut 1 centimeter off. Now I've got a panel that will fit beautifully on the front of my card and give me a nice little border. I've got these ink pads, which I picked up from CraftStash, and I have no idea if they're still available. They are the Ulta New ink pads, and they come in an ombre color set. So I really like how the thought process is already done for me. I don't have to try and find all my ink pads to kind of layer up in those colors. And all I'm going to do is start with the lightest color first. Make sure you're doing that because cleaning the foam is really quite difficult. You can clean it, but you risk warping it and you risk it peeling off your block. So I try to go dark or light to dark, and then that way I don't have to worry about cleaning too much because the dark color is going to cover it up. But you see here, I end up thinking I want to fill in that space a little bit more, so I do give it a good clean and stamp again. Now the little ones are really good fun. You could put a whole bunch of these little ones onto a block and do a big background full of just small balloons. This time I'm just going to fill in some of the white space with those little balloons and just kind of stamp them off my card a little bit and in and around to fill up that white space. Now to kind of close off that card and give it a bit of an edge, I'm going to come in and use an ink dauber and ink up my edges with my darkest color. And that kind of gives it a nice sort of line to the card, if that makes sense. Normally I would layer up my card and have a nice little layer behind it, but I thought I wanted to keep this a bit flatter because I'm already going to have a bit of dimension from my die cuts going on top. So I'm going to go and glue my panel right onto my base and line it up centrally. If I use my liquid glue, it means I can wiggle it into place because I never get things very straight, so that helps. Then I've gone ahead and die cut out the base of the die and then the top 2 layers. So I'm missing that first layer that comes after the base layer. Sorry, the second layer that comes after the first base layer. I'm going to skip that one out and I'm just going to use the top 2. So then you can see that little bit of embossing on this silver. So remember how I said that the base die does emboss your cardstock. It shows up really nice on foil card. So you can see that definition a bit better. Now I wanted the balloon to pop a bit more and kind of stand out. So I'm just tracing it with a white pen, and it's really hard to see in the video. There are photos towards the end of this little project where you can see my lines and how I've drawn them in, and they do kind of make it stand out a little bit more. I'm going to use some foam, double-sided foam tape just to pop my sentiment up, and I'm going to pop it right in the middle of the balloon so that your eye is drawn to that balloon that's popping off. I felt like it was a bit bland, so I've added in some sparkle onto the card just to make it shine and look a little bit pretty, and I did the sentiment strip as well. So you can see that shine a little bit better in these photos. And if you want to kind of create a better background, a quicker, easier background, then you can use the designer paper in this bundle and you can put that behind your stamps. Now here's another one I did with the butterfly, and I offset the stamping. So I did the first one in the light pink and then I did the second stamp in the dark pink using the exact same one, and I just shifted it down slightly or up slightly, just to kind of give that dimensional feeling to it, and added a whole bunch of Nouveau drops all over it. And then I used the dye itself to create a stencil to make the shimmer on the inside of the butterfly's wings. Now we're going to move on to the next card, and for this one we're going to do a bit of a distressed look. I'm going to go for a vintagey, bit more grungy look to these dyes because I'm quite a clean cut person, and I realized I really needed something different for those people who can't envision what it would look like if you did a different style. And I do like the style as well, I just always forget I can do it. So I've die cut my top layer and then the next layer down, one in the designer paper and one in vellum, and I've got my craft cardstock as my base. So I'm going to use a ink blending tool and some distress ink. I can't remember, I think it's walnut stain. And I'm just going to ink up the edges, and I'm going to use two colors. Actually, this is frayed burlap, and I think walnut stain is coming next. So I'm just kind of grunging up the edges, distressing the edges, and then I'm going to come in with a slightly darker color and just do a bit of a finer line around the edge of that card. Now I'm going to do very similar to the butterfly. I'm going to ink up the butterfly. This is vellum, so it does take longer to dry, so you will get inky fingers doing it. If you see my hands by the end of the video, my hands are just covered in ink. I wanted to add a bit more character to it, so I decided to take the slightly darker ink and kind of dab it on, and it gave it sort of a rustic look to it, but it wasn't quite what I was going for. So I set that aside to dry while I figure out a plan and work on the colourful butterfly. So I'm going to come in and do the edges of my butterfly and ink it up a bit, and then I do the same thing I did on the vellum one and just kind of dab that ink onto the top really lightly, just sort of blob it on, splotch it on, and it just kind of helps to numb that brightness out of the cardstock, but you can still sort of see it's there, but it tones it down a little bit. So it gives you a bit more of a grungy vintage look. Now at this point I realized, actually let's just scrunch up the butterfly, and then I get some creases, I get more texture, and then that texture also helps to pop the butterfly off my card. So right now I'm inking it up with the dark ink along those creases so that you can see those creases a bit more and they stand out a bit more. And again, I worked out that I need to go a little bit slower and I need to crease a bit more intentionally, if that makes sense, because my crumpling it in my hand didn't do enough creases. It just kind of overall crumpled it. So I intentionally creased certain parts of it and inked up those bits. Now with the vellum, I'm just going to glue down the center. I want the wings to be more dimensional. I want them to pop off a bit. So I'm only applying glue to the center of the body. Now at this point I could have gone ahead and added some antenna from the base dye, but I just left it as it is without the antenna, so I hope it doesn't look too awkward. To get a fold in my wings, I decided to use my bone folder just to kind of crease up that side so I didn't rip my paper while doing this, and then I folded the wings back. So because my vellum is all scrunched up, it kind of holds those wings up in place, and then that bit of curl helps to give it a little bit more character. So when you look at the card from the side, it looks quite cool and you've got quite a lot of dimension to it. Now to keep in line with how things are going, I grabbed one of my sentiments from my little jar of sentiments that I made up, and I decided to ink that up as well, doing the same thing as before, sort of doing the edges and then dabbing the center to get a bit of a distressed look. So you can see the back is completely white and the front is nice and colored to match the rest of the card. Now I take my bone folder and curl it just slightly, not adding too much pressure, but enough that I get a beautiful little bit of a curl. And I'm putting foam tape just under that curly bit. And what I wanted to do was wedge it into this butterfly so that it was kind of popping out the middle of it. And it worked well, and I really loved this card in the end. It's got a lot of character and dimension to it, and it just seems to flow really nicely all together. So I was quite pleased with how this one came out. Next, I wanted to take the die and share with you that you can kind of make the die a background. So we're going to do tone on tone. So I'm going to go ahead and make my card base so that it is just the width of my die and a bit longer. So I wanted to have space where I could split the die in half. So I cut my card base to fit my die. So it's the same width but a bit longer. I've got some dies from the creative range from CraftStash, which I use for my sentiments a lot at the moment. And I'm going to use that today on this card. So I've got thank you, and it comes with a background layer as well as the intricate die cut. There's also a stamp set it comes with, so if you didn't want to use the die, you could then use the stamp set. I'm going to cut the flower directly in half. so I can go ahead and place things in the middle of it. Now there might be an easier way to doing this, but I was feeling a bit tired and I was rolling with it. So I'm pretty sure if you did your strip in the middle, that would probably be the wiser way to go. But I didn't want to run out of room for my flower, and I didn't want to have to cut my flower off the edge of the card. So I did the flower first. So I go ahead and glue my 2 flower bits onto my card, the top and the bottom. And then I decided I wanted to add a bit more bling to it. So this is my strips jar. Sits on my desk. All my offcuts go in there. Any strip offcuts go in there. And I also have some bits that I pre-cut. So I've got some holographic card that I've got in pre-cut that has sticky back already on it. So what I'm going to do now is do my sentiment. So I've got my holographic card, and I just take a bit of my double-sided sticky tape, run it along the back of the card. So I'm going to make my sentiment self-adhesive, because it's a bit fiddly gluing down these little sentiments. So I find if I put sticky back on it to start, it makes it much easier. So there it is, all die cut out. And then I've got my backing piece ready to go in white, and I can just peel off the release sheet and stick down my words, and then I don't have glue poking out everywhere, and it just goes on nice and easy. So if you've not seen that trick before, you don't have to have the big expensive sheets of double-sided tape. You can just use your tape rolls that you can get from the dollar store or pound shop, and just as long as it's nice thin die, you can apply that to the back of your cardstock. So again, as I said, I pre-made some sticky back strips. So these ones already have this double-sided tape on the back of them, and I'm just going ahead and pulling that release paper off and lining it up against the edge of that flower, and it gives me a nice pretty border. I did this because I wanted to keep it nice and continuous. I wanted the card to feel like it was flowing. I didn't want to stick my strips and my middle strip down over top of the die. I wanted it to kind of be nice in one layer, if that makes sense. So I did measure that gap in between and cut my cardstock down to fit exactly in the center of that, and it did work out just fine. It just probably took a little bit longer than if I did the strip first and left space on both the top side and bottom side of my card for my flower to go in. But never mind, I had a good time. So I'm going to go ahead and stick my sentiment on, add some glue onto the back of that, and stick it down. And then that gives me a beautiful little front to the card. I felt like it still needed something more on the card, so I decided to bring in some gems. These are just flat back gems, and I went ahead and stuck those all over the front of the card, and you get this gorgeous shine and shimmer from the little diamonds on the top. And I cut the sides off of that thank you so that the card ended where it was supposed to end. So we're going to move on now to the next one, where we are going to take the dies and we are going to use them as stencils, basically. So I've got a card base that I cut to fit the star. I think it was about a 5 1/4 by 5 1/4 roughly. And I've got my intricate star, so the top layer and the bottom layer of the die set. So this piece of card here is the exact same size as my card base. So as you can see, when I line them on top of each other, they're exactly the same. And that's what's going to create my first stencil. So I'm going to run that through my die cut machine and get my stencil ready. Now, to help me with my ink blending, I put a little bit of removable adhesive on the back of that layer of card, just in the tricky bits that might pop up. Then I take some low tack tape, so like post-it note tape works really well, and just make sure that that top panel is nice and stuck down. Then I'm going to come in with Squeeze Lemonade, which is a nice bright yellow, and apply my ink with my ink blending brush all over the inside. It doesn't have to be perfect, it can look a little bit blotchy, it doesn't matter. And then I really wanted the edges just to have a little bit of that fiery kind of reddish orange, so I'm using, I think it's Worn Lipstick to do the outside edge. Now this is the next fun part. You can do this with all the die sets. You pop that die right back in the middle of that stencil that you've created, the original stencil. And I'm going to take some orange this time around, and I'm going to use the die itself as a stencil. And this is great because you can just wipe down the die when you're done. There's no need to create a new stencil or try and find a stencil that matches. You can just use the die itself. So that is the nice bit about all these dies, how they have the embossed sort of area if you were to use it with an embossing map. But if you don't, you can use it as a stencil as well and put it right over your image and color it in, and you get this gorgeous little pattern that shows up afterwards. So all I do is take that ink blending brush and just rub over the top and add that ink right through the holes of my die, and then I can lift it up and have this gorgeous pattern ready to go for the rest of my card. So So here's the reveal. I do get a little bit of a blob of ink there down towards the bottom, and my little edging isn't the most beautiful. But once I take everything off, it's quite a fun pattern. You'll see another sample in just a minute of one I did with the flower. So this time I went and cut some gold cardstock for a top layer just to kind of accent it. And I decided to curl the edges out just ever so slightly so that you can see the hard work underneath a bit more. And again, I'm just going to apply glue to the center of my die cut. It doesn't need loads of glue, it will stick quite nice. And I just do that center edge and stick it down over top. And then because we use that original, the first layer of the die, you can see all the inking through it. I'm going to use the gold clear Nouveau drops in line with my sort of gold and yellow type theme going on, and just add those in the top corners of each of the little die cuts. I hope I'm making sense here. Sometimes I start to ramble when I'm doing my voiceovers and I get too excited about what I'm making, and I don't know if I actually make any sense to you who are watching. So I hope it makes sense, but I had a lot of fun and I love adding Nouveau drops or gems or things to finish off my cards. The nice thing with these drops is that it's still a very masculine card. At no point does it look overly feminine, so it's quite nice. You can use it for anyone you want to give it to. So I went and stamped out my sentiment and die cut out, popped it on a layer, and I'm going to pop that off the edge of my card, and it obviously says happy birthday. And again, it's the same kind of color scheme that I was already working with, so that matches nicely. And at this point, I'm trying to be very careful because I should have done it before I put the Nouveau drops on, and the Nouveau drops are still very, very wet. So do remember, if you're using anything like that, any glues or Nouveau drops, just make sure that you're very careful not to put your hand in it when you're done, and put it somewhere safe to dry. So here's the flower I made for the CraftStash website for the design team member aspect of my role. And here's another one that I made as well. So there were 3 in total that have used this technique on. I do love the flower. The flower is the exact same as the star. I just popped that base layer die right back into my stencil that I created and was able to ink blend over top and get right into those little creases, these sort of embossing elements of the die itself, and got such a gorgeous look to it. I also had a flower in my stash. You could use, if you have the flower foaming set from CraftStash, you could create your own flowers out of fun foam and get that dimensional look on the top. And that takes me to the end of my tutorial tonight. I hope you've had a really fun time with me. The links to the products are in the description box below, so if you'd like to get your hands on any of these, please do go ahead and click that and have a look and check them out. But for now, enjoy viewing all the pictures of the creations I have made with these products. There are several more that you have not seen yet, so carry on watching to the very end. Thank you so much for joining me, and I look forward to seeing you on Saturday night for some Saturday night crafting. Take care. Bye!